Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Charles from the channel Books on Stereo. I'm here to bring you a really special interview. You guys have seen her books all over the place, and I have the Martha Waters on my channel, and I'm so happy to be talking with you today. To Love and to Love was just released, so we'll definitely be talking about that book. But first off, Martha, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm a little tired. Launch week is a lot. It's kind of
Yeah.
exhausting, but I'm really good and I'm really excited to be here chatting with you.
Yeah, and so my first question that I have to ask is, how did you get into writing romance? Were you always an avid romance reader, and you decided, hey, I want to write, I want to try my hand at writing a romance, or were you just like, I always want to be a romance writer?
I always since I was like a really little kid, I found my writing journal from I think second grade recently. So that desire goes back like as long as I can remember basically. But romance, I feel like a lot of romance readers and writers seem to have the whole story of like I was stealing my mom's harlequins when I was like 13. And I don't have that at
Hmm.
all. I really wanted to write like YA fantasy for a really long time. But when I was in grad school to become a librarian, I had to take a popular materials class and we had to read romance one week. And so I just picked a Julia Quinn book kind of by chance and read it and ended up really liking it. So then I read
Okay.
her entire backlist and like Lisa Kleypas's entire backlist and did this really deep historical romance dive. And then I started reading contemporary romance. And then I had just finished writing a book that I was trying to query unsuccessfully. And so I wanted to start working on something new. And I was like, well, I've read literally like 200 romance novels in the past year and a half. So I'm going to try writing one. And that was what turned into Having to Hoax.
Oh, okay. That's interesting you say that because like when I first saw To Have and Hoax pop on my radar, everyone was like, she's like the new Tessa Dare. I was like, that's like lofty shoes, like the
Agreed.
Queen Tessa Dare. I'm like the rom com queen, the historical rom com queen. I was like, okay, let me check out this book, and like it was absolutely amazing. I love
Thank you.
how you did something completely different. So were you always intending on writing a married couple and writing their romance? Because that's something rare you don't see a lot of times in romance. You tend to see the part before they get married.
Yeah, it's funny. I don't think I realized how uncommon that like marriage and trouble trope was. I think I thought it was more common than it actually is.
Hmm.
Because one of the first romance authors I read, as I said, was I read Eloisa James, and she has written a lot of marriage and trouble books, like a weirdly large number of them, I think. And so reading her as one of like the first romance authors that I read, I just thought it was this really common trope, and I loved it, especially in historicals. I think because it's kind of a way to create this like shared backstory, and also when they're already married, you don't have to worry about like, oh, if they're alone on a balcony together, they have to get married or something. Like you kind of can
Like the
explore.
impropriety of it
Yeah,
all.
yeah. So it gives you a lot more flexibility, and I just really liked it just because I think it's interesting to kind of see a couple that's been together a while and had issues and kind of like trying to come back together. So I really love reading them. I'm always excited when I discover one. So yeah, it was pretty early in the first part of the idea for Tavern to Hoax was the fake consumption, but the married couple piece came like almost immediately after that. Because yeah, I really love that trope a lot. So
Oh, that's so cool because like I didn't realize going into it was like a married couple, and I was like, what? I was like, what's going on here? Because like I know like so many times like I think I've only read like maybe one or two like couple like historical romances where the couple was already together. Because like I was wondering, did you find it any difficulties like creating the conflict within that story? And kind of using that miscommunication trope because I know some people may say like they're always like, why can't the characters just talk to
oh
each
yeah.
other? And like you avoided falling into that trap. So I was like, she's like doing amazing with this trope right now. So like, did you find any difficulties like with plotting out like the main conflict between a
Yeah,
married couple?
yeah, it's tricky, and I mean, I do think there are readers out there who have read To Heaven to Hoax. I'm guessing who had that reaction of like just talk to each other, which is fair. Like it's totally fair, especially like when you have a miscommunication kind of be your basis of like your whole conflict. Some readers are not going to be able to get on board with that, and that's totally
Hmm.
fair. It was hard to come up with a conflict for them because it needed to be. I needed them to have been estranged for a decent amount of time because
Hmm.
I felt like it was really key to their conflict that they got married when they were really young. Like Violet was
Hmm.
18 and James was 23 when they got married. And even by Regency standards, like that was quite young. And I felt
Yeah.
like them being so young really contributed to their issues because they were just babies. They didn't know how to like have a
Mm-hmm.
healthy relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then I also needed enough time to pass due to this conflict and like them not talking to each other for them to then feel older and more mature and more like capable of kind of
Mm-hmm.
doing better basically. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this 4 year gap, and that feels like a lot. And I was like, it feels like a long time for it to have just been like a miscommunication. But I guess the way I think about it is like if you, they can get divorced. Like if they were like your average like 18-year-old couple, they would have just broken up and like never
Well,
gotten back together again. But you couldn't get divorced. I mean, you could. But you had to like literally petition Parliament. There's an entire Sarah McLean book about that. Um, but yeah, you basically couldn't get divorced. So they're kind of just stuck with each other. So I just it was tricky to write, especially because I kind of came up with this sort of like prank war aspect of it first, and then I
mm-hmm.
had to figure out like why they were doing this.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it also was just like, when I was writing it, I never tried writing a romance before. I never tried writing a book for adults at all. I'd only tried writing for kids and teens.
Mm-hmm.
And I was having a lot of fun with it, but it was also kind of like a bit of a learning curve. Like, okay, this is longer, and so like the beats land at different points in the story, like in terms of word count. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was hard, but it's also like the most fun I've ever had writing anything, because just writing like your first book when it hasn't been published, like in a new genre, like it was just so much fun. So I hope that kind of comes through when you're reading the book, that I was just having a lot of fun as I was writing it.
Yeah, it did, and I kind of got like the Tessa Dare because like the humor in it. I was like
I
the
love
humor
her.
landed. I was like, oh yeah, now I can see like why people were like comparing this to Tessa Dare. And I was like, at first I was like, is this Tessa Dare like pseudonym or something? Because it's not like a traditional like like I don't know, like
That is
maybe
a
she
huge
like
compliment. So thank you. I still remember I think the first Tessa Dare book I ever read was, because she was one of the first authors I read also. Because she's one that like everyone recommended when I was like, I'm getting into historical romance. Here's some other authors, and everyone was like, you have to read Tessa Dare. The first one I read of hers was the first Spindle Cove book.
oh
A Night to Surrender, that one. And I
mhm.
remember reading the beginning of that book and like literally laughing out loud on the first page of the book. And I was just like, I don't know who this author is, but she's a genius.
Hey, but you replicated that. Like when I thought, I was like, is this a pen name for like Tessa Dare? I'm like, it could very much be because like I don't think she does like established couple romances. Like I could be wrong because I haven't read all her books, so there may be one that I don't know of.
I can't. I've read her entire backlist, and I can't think of.
I don't think so.
I need more people to do this. I really love this trope, and I really want like all the authors that I love to write a bunch of marriage and travel books.
Well, because I think so much of romance, which is one thing I really appreciate about this book, is that a lot of romances like to focus on like their first look at each other. They're falling in love, and then like the wedding when they get married is typically they're happily ever after, and then you just assume they're just happy for the rest of the years that they're married, and you don't see even like in the indie space or a lot of other categories within romance, you tend not to see like established couples, older couples that are already in like long term relationships and then having to deal with a conflict because I feel like just like hearing the way you describe, like you have to like do more to like make a conflict believable. And like, why didn't they just get divorced? And then like that's the end of your book. And then like you introduce another romance, another like love interest, and we're like, wait, what is Martha doing right now? It's like it wasn't the guy that she was married to, but like this new guy that she meets.
Yeah, it's funny because that's why I think like I remember when the Bromance Book Club came out, which was only a few months
Mm,
before To Heaven to Hoax came out. I was really excited because I was like, man, you never see this in contemporaries, especially. I feel like it
mm-hmm.
only really works in historicals because it's like, well, they can't get divorced, so they may hate
Yeah,
each other, but they're just stuck together forever. Have fun, guys. So I was really interested to read the Romance Book Club and see someone trying to write that like trope in a contemporary setting, because I think that's really tricky as well to make it like believable that these people in like the year 2020 would still be married.
mm-hmm.
Um, and that one hasn't been nearly as long of a gap as it was in like the conflict lasted a lot longer in my book than it did in Romance Book Club. But yeah, I don't know. It's a fun trope, but I just really like. I don't know. I really like when you start reading a romance and the characters already have history together.
Mhm.
So like any trope that involves like them kind of already knowing each other pretty well at the beginning of the
Mhm.
book, I'm here for that. So
Yeah, I have another question. Do you already know like what the miscommunication was and how you're going to reveal it in the latter part of the book? Because I felt like it came at the right time. Like, did you already know like where you wanted those sections to be, and kind of like what needed to build up to get to that point?
yeah, I kind of figured out what the I'm not much of a plotter, but I did figure out like what the
Hmm.
miscommunication was going to be like as well, like pretty early on in the book, and then it was kind of like a trying to figure out like how much to reveal of it, and like because there's like a few like allusions to it like early in the book as well,
Hmm.
but then I basically, and then, so for a while, I was like, I guess I could just reveal this at the beginning, but I felt like, I don't know, the fact that Violet and James were both so hesitant to even talk to their own friends about it, like it was such like a personal, like hurtful thing to them. They didn't really want to open
Hmm.
up to anyone about it. I felt like it made it better to keep the reader a little bit in the dark as well, especially because I kind of
Hmm.
I feel like this is true in a lot of romances, but especially in this one, I really use the friends on page as like reader stand-ins to say the things that the readers are thinking a lot of the time, like
Hmm.
this is a terrible idea. Like, why don't you guys just talk to each
Hmm.
other? Why are you pretending to have a deadly illness? This is unhinged,
Yeah.
etc. And so really keeping the readers kind of knowing what the friends knew was like worked well for like kind of how I was writing the like sort of side characters in the book. So
Wow, I didn't even think of that until you mentioned that. Like, I was like, oh, I didn't even realize that until you said that. And then, like, I love the whole. It's not a spoiler. Like, it's part of the prank wars, kind of like she fakes an illness, and like the one thing he does to one up her, I was like, I love. Like, he's like, oh, bring your mommy dearest, and she's like, oh no, like why? Like, why would you do this to me?
that was my editor's idea. That scene was not in the original draft, and she was
Oh,
like,
really?
yeah, and she was like, because I kind of like played around. I couldn't like, it was like, how many they don't know, we know, they know, we know, like how deep do we go down this road, kind of. And so she was like, I think you need to do something. Like if Violet's mom is so terrible, you need to have him like bring her mom over. And I was like, yes, I love this. So I wrote that whole scene when I was doing revisions, and I was just like sitting there like typing away on my laptop, like cackling to myself as I was writing it.
It reminded me so much. Like, this is like a really. I don't even know like if you like thought about this when writing the mother character of the mother in Pride and Prejudice. I can't remember her
Oh
name.
yeah, Mrs. Bennett.
Mrs. Bennett, and she was like over the top, like, "Oh, Mr. Bennett, my daughters will never." I felt like she was like Mrs. Bennett, but like slightly eviler.
Yeah, she's the worst. I think she's my least favorite. I was doing an event earlier this week about To Love and To Loathe, and someone was like, "What's a character you love and what's a character you loathe?" And I was like, I actually don't loathe anyone in To Love and To Loathe, but into Having to Hoax, I'm not a fan of Violet's mom. She's horrible. I hate her. So
And
my mom has been really paranoid that people are gonna think that
you were,
Violet's mom is based on her. I mean, she like would not shut up about it when To Heaven to Host coming out last year. She was like, I mean, this is just awful. They're all, and I was like, I don't think people automatically make that assumption when they're reading books. That would be really weird. And she was like, nope, they're going to think it. And I was like, well, no one who knows you would think that. They know we get along. And she's like, well, most people who read your book don't know you and don't know me. And I'm like, well, then why do you care? And she was like, I need you to publicly state that the mother is not based on me. So I had mentioned it at like 4 different events now. Like, for anyone reading To Happen to Hoax, Violet's mom is not based on my mom. Oh, hello, Puffin. Oh, God. Get down.
wow, I wouldn't have even thought about that.
I know, because it's not so you don't read a book and think, oh yes, I'm sure this is I'm sure this Regency rom-com about someone faking consumption is autobiographical. Like
Oh,
obviously every character corresponds to someone in the author's life. I bet she's faked consumption before. No, no one thinks that.
I would hope not, because that would be a lot. But like, that's so funny. Like, I would have never thought that. It's like your
Well,
friend, like your best friends are going like, "Did you write that friend after me? Like, is that based off of
doesn't
me?"
make any sense. No, well, it's fine. Both Jeremy and Diana's mothers are dead in To Love and To Loathe, so I mean, now my mom's probably gonna be like, Does everyone think your mother's dead?
is dead. Oh, and then to talk about To Love and To Loathe, but not too spoilery, but the premise for this one, I like cackle. I just like laughed when you did the premise. I was like, really? I was like, when the heroine says like, I should just slap you at her, just like standing, just because I'm just generally appalled. I was like, I feel you. I just want to slap him too. I was like, that's
Exactly. That's my general reaction to like half the men I know. So like I just want to slap you. So yeah. So To Love and To Loathe, the whole premise is that Jeremy the hero has gotten some unflattering feedback in the bedroom, and so he goes to Diana and is like, "Hey, we're going to this house party, like my mansion in the countryside. So, if you could just like sleep with me while we're there, because I know that you don't like me enough to lie to flatter me, so you'll give me like an honest review on my bedroom skills." And
performance.
Diana's initial reaction is like, what the hell? And then she's kind of like, well, actually, because she, wants to get some practice in the bedroom as well, because she wants to be the
Mm-hmm.
lover, because she's a widow. And also, she and Jeremy made this bet into having to hoax that he'd be married within a year. And so she wants to win. And she thinks that, like, if she's, I don't know, like exchanging pillow talk with him, she'll like learn all of his secrets and figure out how to like trick him into marriage. So, yeah, it's a totally normal setup for a book.
But I loved it so much. Did you already have the idea for To Love and To Loathe when you were writing To Heaven to Hoax, or did it come after you finished To Heaven to
So
Hoax?
when I started writing To Heaven to Hoax, as I was like kind of giving Violet and James all these friends, like I knew I wanted them both to have like a really good friend group.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of knew I wanted to write stories for Diana and Emily. I originally like envisioned it as like a trilogy, although well, I'm not sure if the third one's going to be the last one or not. Like we'll see, because I have some other ideas now as well. But we shall see. Publishing is unpredictable.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't really have any kind of like clearly like visualized plot for Diana or Emily, and I didn't even necessarily when I first started writing, I didn't even like know that like Diana and Jeremy were going to be together. But as soon as they were on page together, their voices for both of them just came like so clearly to me. Like I really didn't do that much like character planning for either of them, because they kind of just like sprang into my mind like as they are.
Yeah.
And so whenever they were on page together, I felt like they were like taking over the scene they were in. I was like, no, this is your book, shut up. And so I was like, okay, well, I have to write a book for them. And when I wrote this scene into Having to Hoax at the ball where they make this like impulsive bet about Jeremy being
Mm-hmm.
married within a year, that was totally unplanned. Like it was just they all started
Oh.
talking, and I was just this is what happens when you don't plot your books very well. Is like just stuff just randomly pops up. So yeah, that was totally unplanned. I was just like writing away, and they're like talking, and it's like, I bet you'll be married within the year, 100 pounds, and I was like, intriguing. So like once I finished writing that one and started thinking about To Love and To Loathe, I knew I wanted to incorporate the bet somehow, but
Mm-hmm.
I originally thought I was going to use it as like it would maybe take place over a whole year, and it would be all about like Diana trying to like find this husband for Jeremy. But then I decided I didn't want to do that. I kind of liked the sort of more compressed time frame of To Heaven to Hoax, and I wanted to kind of mimic that. So then I don't know. I just got very like meta, and the idea for Jeremy like not being great in bed came to me just after reading 5 zillion romance novels where the hero is like instantly a genius in bed, and I was like, I really want to have fun with that idea, and I feel like this could be a fun character to do it with. So
Mm-hmm.
I just went from there.
I just have to say like when I didn't because I didn't read the synopsis when I picked up To Love and To Loathe. I was like, I'm just gonna go in. I'm just gonna go in blind. I'm just gonna read it. I know who this book is gonna be following, but I don't know what the plot is gonna be. So I'm like, I'm just gonna be going in blind. And I was like, wait, what? I was like, that's a setup. I was like, that's romance gold, Martha. I was like angry at you. I was like, oh, that's such a good premise. Like now, I'm like now, like after the premise, I'm like now I have to finish this book in one night because like now I need to know how it's gonna happen because obviously they're gonna catch feelings for each other
Of
during
course.
this arrangement. It's like let's sleep together, but then we're just not gonna be friends because we don't we're not gonna be lovers because we don't like each other that way. But yet they catch feelings. It's like typical romance, but like oh my goodness, this book was just it's it's a little bit it's very almost like I wouldn't say like it's completely different to Having to Hoax, but it feels almost like you have like two different tropes that you can choose from, like which one the readers will want to go. Like this one, you have more almost like an enemies to lovers type trope
I've
mixed.
been calling it frenemies to lovers because because I've seen some people complaining, they're like, this isn't really enemies to lovers. They're not really enemies. And I'm like, I didn't claim they were. It's like such a weird, I feel like there are other romance novels that do this trope as well. And no one knows what to call it because they're not
They're
friends
not really
exactly, but
enemies.
they're not really enemies either. So like, what are they? They're frenemies.
That you need to coin that term and like create a whole subcategory in romance where it's like frenemies to lovers. Because I feel like even when I called it enemies to lovers, I was like, it's not really. They don't really like
Yeah.
die hard hate each other.
Yeah.
They're just like they would rather marry and like interact with other people than each other, but they don't hate each other.
Yeah. And they're like in denial about like this like connection between them also that it's kind of like everyone else can kind of see it. Like I don't think anyone else is surprised when they catch feelings.
Hmm.
It's just them who are
It's just
surprised.
like I was like, come on, you guys are the last to know. Like
Yeah,
we were all like
exactly.
sitting there like we already know like you guys have chemistry. Like just pick up the pace a little bit and get on board a little bit more.
Like, come on, guys.
And so was this book any different to write than the first one since the characters like came to you so strongly?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually wrote the very, 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 very first, like zero, incredibly rough draft for it while I was
Hmm.
on submission with To Have into Hoax. So it was a little bit of kind of like an act of faith because I was like, well, if To Have into Hoax doesn't get picked up by a publisher, then I just wasted time writing an entire book because no one's going to publish
Hmm.
a like spin-off book if a first book doesn't sell. But
Hmm.
I just like couldn't stop thinking about them. And so I I don't know if I don't the whole process is interesting because yeah, like writing that first draft was really fast and it came to me pretty easily, and then
Hmm.
revising it was harder because it was after I'd already sold To Have into Hoax and I'd revised that one, and I was working on like finishing up a draft of To Love and to Loathe to give to my editor kind of like in the couple of months before To Have into Hoax came out, and like To Have into Hoax had gotten some really good like trade reviews and stuff, so I was starting to sort of like feel the pressure as I was like doing my own revisions. And so I turned it into my editor. It was right
Hmm.
at the beginning of the pandemic also, when I turned it into my
Oh
editor.
no.
And then I had to do all of her suggested revisions like in
Hmm.
April and May, which was not a great time for anyone really at the beginning
Hmm.
of the pandemic. And I was
Yeah.
feeling very insecure about it. I was worried that it wasn't like as funny as To Have into Hoax. I was worried people wouldn't like it as much. And then I hit this point at some point around like late in the revision stage where I was reading through it and I was like,
Hmm.
nope. Actually, I love this book. I feel good about it. And I've actually been much less nervous in the lead up to publication. Like, I haven't been as worried about people's opinions as I was with To Have into Hoax. I just love the book so much that
Hmm.
it's like this just like deep love that I have for it has like cushioned me from any like negativity basically.
And like I like when I started reading the first book to the second book, I was like, oh my goodness, I like this even more than the first book. I was like, I need to reevaluate my rating for the first book because if I like the second book more, then I can't give them both 5 out of 5 stars. Like one has to be technically lower to show like
Yeah,
this one's my favorite.
I think I would say the majority of people I've heard from would say they liked Love and to Loathe even more than To Have and to Hoax. Including I've heard from a couple people. I was like, you didn't actually need to tell me this. Who were like, I didn't like To Have and to Hoax, but I liked this one a lot. And I'm like, I could have actually done without that information, but okay. um, I think that To Have it's fine, just the cat climbing on furniture. It's like, oh my god,
Like
is
who was
someone
it?
attacking the house? Is this like the Middle Ages? Is the castle under siege? No, it's a cat climbing on a cabinet. I think To Have and to Hoax is a little bit more challenging just with the whole like setup for it. It's very silly and
Hmm.
very like either you can get on board with the like kind of miscommunication hijinksy stuff or you can't. And I think Love and to Loathe has a little bit less of that. So I think maybe it's a little more
Hmm.
accessible for more readers. But yeah, a lot of my friends were just like, I was like, I'm worried it's not as funny. They're like, well, we think it's funnier. And I was like, okay, thanks guys. Thanks for the support. Like, cool team. I feel good.
Yeah, and that's like one thing I love about these two books. Like you can they feel very much the same, but they also feel like two different variations. So like, if you like the miscommunication trope and you want to see like a more established couple romance, you can go that way, or you can go the other way. And I just like you didn't have like your typical girl meets dude, girl is a wallflower, has been passed over for seasons, and she's like super old by society standards. And then like she meets the Duke, and then like everything randomly takes off from there. I'm basically describing the Duke and I almost.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to actually do that, but I feel like most people are like,
Except the
isn't
Duke
he?
and I is even weirder because she's like not really a wallflower. Even it's like
Yeah, she's
she's
like a
just
hot commodity.
like she's like popular, but just like gets friend zoned essentially is kind of like the setup, at least in the book. They changed it a little bit for the show, but like
Hmm.
in the book, it really is like she's not a wallflower. Like she's just not like the most beautiful girl of her year or whatever. It's like, I don't know. And I also will say, I feel like this is going to get me murdered, but I'm actually like, I don't love the rake and wallflower trope. Like, it's fine. I don't dislike it. And like, I, like,
Oh no.
I don't mind it. I've read many a rake and wallflower book and loved them. I mean, like, look at like Devil in Winter, like one of the most famous romance novels ever. Like, I love that book despite
Hmm.
the fact that it in some ways is a little problematic through a 2021 lens. But it's like a great book. So there's so many good ones, but I just like I'm not super interested in writing it. Because I feel like when you're writing a historical, the power dynamics are already so imbalanced with the man having so much more
Mm,
power than the woman that I'm like not super interested in writing a wallflower heroine because I feel like that kind of just exacerbates that already existing power differential.
mhm.
And I know part of the joy of that trope is watching like this like wallflower like bring this man to his knees
His
basically and
knees.
like have him realize how
Mhm.
amazing she is. But I'm also like I don't know the whole like no one realizes how beautiful you are except for the hero like doesn't land for me that well because I'm like no I
Mm,
also just like beautiful heroines also because my perspective is that in 1817 when my books are set being beautiful is like social capital for a woman. It's a way that
mhm,
she is powerful. And so I like my heroines to have kind of like weapons in their arsenal.
mhm,
And that
mhm,
way, like Diana is very aware of like the fact that she's attractive to men and like uses that fact. And yeah, I'm kind of interested in like playing around with the way that beauty is like currency for women in this
mhm.
time.
Oh, that's really interesting. I had an interesting question that I wanted to follow up with that with. How do you balance more modern sensibilities within a historical romance, especially you already touched on like the power imbalance between men and women during the time frame, and I think more readers. I think that's sometimes what some of the criticisms that people can lodge against historical romances is that the female characters are usually more submissive. They don't have a lot of agency. They're kind of bossed around by the hero, but I would have to push back on that and say, have you read like dark romance and contemporary romance? Like it exists in that space too. Like it's definitely there. So I was wondering how constrained you were by like the historical realities of the time while trying to balance more modern sensibilities that would appeal more to modern readers.
Yeah, it's interesting because like I think I mean, for some people reading a historical romance aren't really looking for like strict historical accuracy. Like you wouldn't be reading a historical
Mm-hmm.
romance novel if you were. And so I'm always very leery of people who start like crying historical accuracy about things because I feel like they are just using that to keep marginalized people from seeing themselves on the page, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like no one cares about historical accuracy that much. Not true. Some people do. Some people are just jerks about it and like, well, I mean,
And we'll call you out.
yeah, I mean, like it's like Sarah McLean is always talking about how people she gets like all these angry emails whenever she uses like the F word in one of her books, and she's like, that word has existed for like 600 years. Like it is historically accurate, FYI. But aside from those people, when you really start to get the people screaming about historical accuracy is whenever you have like a queer character on the page or a person of color on the page. Like I feel like that's when they
Mm-hmm.
come out of the woodwork being like historical accuracy. When first of all, like wrong, all these people existed in the
During that
Regency.
time period.
But also, like, you're willing to believe that there's like this really hot Duke with like
Duke.
abs who's like a feminist, but like you can't believe that like there were black people in the Regency, which there literally were. Like it just doesn't make any sense. But also, and okay, so there's that. Gosh, I was like I had like a TED talk about this. So I'm not overly concerned with historical accuracy. I want it to feel historically accurate enough that you're not taken out of the
Mhm,
story. So I try to shy away from things that feel like really glaringly anachronistic. There are also things that are historically accurate that I'm deliberately writing because they are convenient. There's like a plot piece in my third book that is legitimately historically inaccurate, and I'm like, yeah, I know.
oh.
I don't care. That's fine. I'm cool with it. And I think that my books maybe especially feel very like a lot of people told me they read my
Hmm.
books and feel like they're like not in a bad way necessarily. Like they feel like modern characters kind of dropped into the Regency, which
Hmm.
I'm just writing the books that I want to read. I'm just someone who in the year 2021 sits around reading a lot of like Regency romance.
Hmm.
And I'm like, yeah, I just want to have people wearing ball gowns and like, you know, going riding in Hyde Park, but not actually have to engage with like uh horrifying sexism of the time and stuff. Like
Hmm.
it's romance is supposed to be fun. I think romance can do a lot of important things and like tell important like messages as well, but also
Hmm.
it's supposed to be fun. And so I
Yeah.
engage with the history in the way that it's like convenient from a storytelling perspective. Like I find
Hmm.
writing Regencies to be really fun because you have all of these sort of like constraints on behavior that you have to figure out ways to work around. It's like,
Work
well,
around.
if she's unmarried, she can't be alone with this gentleman, like, and be seen, or they're gonna have to get married. And it's fun to play around with all of that.
Yeah.
But I'm not like sitting here like trying to make sure that every single thing is historically accurate. But also, so it varies from
Hmm.
author to author because some authors, you know, engage more directly with like the historical events happening at the time. Like Evie
Hmm.
Dunmore's series, it deals a lot with the women's suffrage movement in like the 1880s and 90s and stuff. Like that's really
Hmm.
cool. I tend to use the period setting more as like a set piece and a kind of like a plot
Hmm.
device as opposed I'm not as
Hmm.
interested in directly engaging with like what was happening. Someone asked me like, "Oh, did you ever consider having any of your people like? Did you consider setting it earlier, like a few years earlier in the Regency when they were still at war with France, and like having a character like be in the army?" And I was like, "No, I literally deliberately set it when the war was over and like worked it out in my head how it would be that none of the men were in the army. Like I did all this like mental gymnastics to figure it out because I was like." Oh, I don't
I don't want to
care
touch that.
about, yeah, I don't care about war. It's not what I'm interested in.
And that's really cool to hear you say that. And like, I was also gonna bring up Evie Dunmore because like your two books, I would say like between you guys is they're like almost they are definitely historical romances, but they're written in a way that I feel like more modern readers can get into them a lot easier. Because I definitely feel that with some historicals like the Matchmark favorites like Sarah McLean, there's definitely a language to get used to, like how they tell the story, how the characters talk to each other, how the dialogue, how things are described, and I feel like with your books is particular, it's like the perfect entry point for someone who's new to historical romance because you're not bogged down in all the historical details, like and the language is like very easy to kind of get into. So I was like, I really love that about your books. And
Thank
like they
you.
really are. I would say they're a great gateway for getting someone into historical. I would say same with like Evie Dunmore's books. Like
Yeah,
they definitely historicals, but like I can give them to like someone who only reads contemporary, and they'll be like, oh wow, this is like oh this is not so bad. I thought historicals were like old, stodgy, weird writing and like archaic, like problematic elements of, with their heroines and stuff.
yeah. Well, and it's like interesting because I like my literary agent like doesn't represent hardly any historicals. Like I queried her because she represents Sally Thorne, her at the Hating Game, and I love the Hating Game. It's like one of my favorite
Oh.
ever contemporary romances, and so that's why I queried my
Mhm.
agent. And it's funny because she's like she doesn't like do that many historicals, but she was like I feel like this is a she's like has you know a lot of contemporary rom com clients, and she was like I feel like this is a perfect kind of like crossover, like a historical that feels like a contemporary. And it was funny because I didn't really realize that I was writing it. I mean, I realized to a certain like I realized like the extent to which I wanted to engage with the history and I didn't want to engage with the history, but
Mhm.
I wasn't like thinking about the actual tone. I was just writing like this is just how I write. So I wasn't thinking about it that much. But now that it's been pointed out to me a fair number of times, I see it more and I notice it more when I'm reading other historicals as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, and also just getting back to what you were saying like 5 minutes ago about like people talking about the problematic content vis-a-vis like the way heroines behave in historicals. It's so interesting because I mean I'm not a huge fan of like alpha heroes in general. Like it's
Mhm.
fine, but it's like not what I go for really. Like I don't think I would have. I think one of the reasons that Julia Quinn was a good gateway author for me is that like kind of her more recent stuff like from Bridgerton's on has there
Mhm.
she doesn't really write that many alpha heroes. I think that's why I
Mhm.
kind of engaged with it more. Um, but I'm more bothered by alphas in contemporaries than in historicals because I'm like, when I read a
Mm.
contemporary that has like a really intense alpha hero, I'm just like, no, this is supposed to be set now. If a man tried to talk to me like this, I would be out the door in like 5 seconds. Whereas in historical, I'm like, but we're wearing ball gowns and it's 1915 and I have a bonnet on. Actually, fact, there are no bonnets. And actually, well, Diana does not wear any bonnets until Love and to Loathe, which is like wildly historically inaccurate. She 100% would have a bonnet on anytime she left the house. And I'm just like, can you picture this woman wearing a bonnet? Absolutely not. I'm just like, this is a no bonnet wearing heroine. Like, it's never mentioned that she doesn't wear a bonnet in the book. But my headcanon is just like, she's just like, no, no bonnets.
And that's like another thing I love about these two books is that your heroines, I would say, are like even stronger than the heroes that they interact with. Like the heroines are like the boss, like they run the show, like, and I just love that so much. Like you kind of took that and you gave me like alpha female, which I prefer to see, like I like alpha female characters a lot more because I definitely feel it more. I would say more. I wouldn't say like all romance readers, but I would say the alpha male is definitely like a huge trope that is not going away anytime
No,
soon.
no, definitely
Like
not.
it's
And
a
I don't
huge
judge
calling
anyone for
card.
liking alpha males, but like it's fine. Like I'm not trying to yuck anyone's yum. I just don't tend
Yeah,
to like them as much.
I prefer like that's why I like these books so much because I like strong female characters that don't feel like even if they don't have to be like strong in the sense that like they call out people or they I don't even know where I'm going with that, but like they still have some vulnerability to them, especially like if the alpha hero does something like that's problematic, the heroine's like, hold up, wait. Let's address this instead of like in the other in like some contemporaries where like the hero does something bad, the heroine goes like, oh okay, and then does it again and then gets angry at it again. I'm like, okay, you already got angry at it the first time that this happened. You shouldn't be getting angry now at the second time. You should be like, okay, time for the author to give me a new love interest.
Yeah, I just struggle with it a lot when I, as a reader. Sometimes, Puffin, get down, good God. I just yeah, there's some books that I finish reading and I'm like, I just don't know if I really think that this awesome woman should marry this man. Like I don't know. I really it's I mean, there are plenty of alpha heroes that I really love, but I was not super interested in writing them. And I also, with both of my books so far, and with the one I'm working on right now, what I'm really interested in doing as I'm writing romance is really engaging with the tropes that exist in the genre, and then doing unexpected things with them and trying to subvert them and like uh not making I'm not trying to make fun of the genre because I deeply love the genre, but I'm trying to like poke fun at it in like a nice way, like a winky kind of way. Like there's a line in Into Love and to Loathe where Diana makes some comment about how like it's like every aristocratic gentleman has to have a tortured relationship with his father or something.
Yep.
So like like little things like that. I'm trying to write books that people who have read a lot of romances will like have moments of being like, oh, haha, I see what she's doing.
Yeah, that's true. Like every hero has like a torture father like that did something horrible to them that like treats that basically makes them so closed off from everyone and makes them go like I'm too unworthy of love. The dramatics of
Oh yeah,
historical romance.
totally. And I was like, none of my characters have like good family situations out of like the four main characters so far. Like
Yeah,
none of them
no,
have
none of them
good like
do.
family situations at all.
You
Because
know your
it's like
mother's gonna say like, "Are you trying to say something about our romance?"
I know. Well, and it's bad because if I keep writing in this universe, like I have like backstories already like for the characters. I can't really do much about it, and I'm like, oh god. I don't know what to do. I think one of the reasons that I think it's like useful as a writer to have your hero and or heroine not have like a great family situation because then it like gives them something to like bond with the hero
Hmm.
heroine about and also gives them kind of like it makes them closer to their siblings or to their friends or whoever like the major side characters are if they're not as like close
Hmm.
to their parents. But I will say, whenever I read a book where like the hero has like loves his dad and has a really good relationship with him, and the dad is still alive, I'm like, wow, this is refreshing.
This is wholesome. Like it's
Yeah,
wholesome to
like
get like this type of romance.
it's like the
But
well
this,
when books, when she started writing the later Ravenel's ones, where they're like the kids from the Wallflowers series. So all of those heroes and heroines who were like Sebastian and Evie's kids obviously like love their parents because their parents already have their own romance novel, so of course they're good parents.
Yeah.
But like reading it, I was like, gosh, it's so nice to just read this hero who like loves his mom and his dad and his siblings, and they like go to a little country house and like have a house party and everyone's families get along. I was like, this is wild, but I like it.
Yeah. Oh, that's really yeah. I like it. I like that too. I like seeing like healthy relationships
Mm-hmm.
across the board. I
Mm-hmm.
think my like favorite in historicals is like when you have little kids and you do them well. I love like the single parent trope, and they have to like accept the new person coming in. Like, oh my, I eat that. Like, you put like little kids in a historical, I'm like, I'm automatically gonna like it.
Have you read the
Especially
Tessa Dare one where they're like the little girls that keep having to like doll funerals or whatever? Like,
no, but I haven't gotten to that. I like I would say like I'm the worst. Like I only read like maybe five Tessa Dares and like two Lisa Kleypas. Like I'm like I feel like I've read more on the modern, like
mm-hmm.
more of the newer stuff of newer authors. And Sarah McLean is kind of coming up, and I'm reading more and more of her backlist. But I'm like, I would say like I read a lot of historicals, but I read like a lot of like the newer published
Mm-hmm.
historicals. So when people go, "Oh yeah, I've read Lisa Kleypas," I'm like, no, I only read what was it, Seducing My Stranger and Lady Sophia's Lover, the
Oh,
Bow Street.
the Bow Street Runner ones. That was like
And someone just
her.
said those were super steamy. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and that was her. Like, that's so interesting because that was her last series she wrote before she wrote the Wallflowers, and I
Mhm.
tend to like all of her stuff from the Wallflowers on better than her earlier
Oh.
stuff because it's a little old school for me. Like some of the heroes are kind of
Hmm.
intense in her older stuff, especially if you go like really far back, like some of her stuff from like the early '90s, and I'm just like, ooh, 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 I don't know about this. I can't do this. It's too old school. I had a friend who's been on a big Clayface binge this year, and I'd
Hmm.
warned her. I was like, I personally recommend you start with the Wallflowers and move forward from there. And she was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And she started reading her stuff from like 1995, and then she was like, I see what you mean. And I was like, listen, that was 26 years ago, and I think it shows. Like, I feel like romance, especially, is
Hmm.
really like it ages quickly because I feel like it's very like nimble at like responding to current events, kind of not like
Hmm.
specifically about events, but kind of like the cultural moment we're in. Like, I feel like
Hmm.
romance in the past several years, especially post Me Too, feels very feminist. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
but yeah, I just feel like it like really reflects the era it was written in. So a romance novel from 1995 feels old.
Yeah. There's like I would say like there's some exceptions that manage to like transcend time, like that are very forward thinking for their time that like
Mhm.
happen to like, but like those are like a diamond in the rough. Like you had to like search through. You're like, oh no, that had like dubious consent. Oh, I don't know if I like that one. Or I don't know if I like, oh no, that's like I think I read a Joanna Lindsay book that had an opening scene. It was making fun of sexual assault, and I was like, oh, I was like, why didn't no one warn me about this?
No, I've
Like
never read a Joanne. I've never read
I
a
was
Joanna
kind of
Lindsay book.
taken aback. I was like, everyone's raving about this author, and I was like, and I read the. I think everyone read was reading the second book in the her Viking trilogy, and they said, "Oh, it's amazing." But I was like, "No, I'm gonna start with book one and then read book two." I read book one. I was like, "Oh, whoa!" I was not expecting this open.
Yeah, I've never read Joanna Lindsay because I've heard that there is a fair amount of sexual assault in her books, and I know it's a different time, and
Mhm.
I think that there's like value in kind of like reading older authors and kind of understanding the history of the genre. But also, I'm just like,
Yeah,
no, I don't think
no.
so. That's what I found so
Like,
interesting about like Bridgerton and the way they chose to adapt it for in like some of the plot pieces they kept in it for an adaptation.
mhm,
Is I'm like, listen, this book came out in 2000. Um,
yeah,
things have changed,
mhm,
and I just think I mean, like I really loved the adaptation despite like warts and all. Like I just thought it was like I just think I can't wait for season two. I thought it was super fun. I like loved it. Like
yeah,
watched the entire thing in one day. But it is interesting seeing an adaptation of a romance novel that's 20 years old because I'm like, romance in 2000 was a totally different world than
It's a
romance
different
now.
place.
Yeah.
Hmm. And like your books are like so reflective of that, like because that's why I like group you in like with the Evie Dunmore, like my new class, like or Scarlett Peckham as well.
I love
Some of her
Scarlett
work that she's
Peckham. Her
been
books are
doing.
so good.
Like the Rakist, I was like,
Oh
I
my
think
God.
I haven't read a ton of romances where the female is the one who has pretty much the more power in the relationship.
That book is
But she's like,
intense.
I was like, I was shocked by that because I was like, what is like, I like she's coming on to the hero and like it's a hero the one that's going like, oh no,
Yeah,
like I just love
it's
that.
that book is amazing. It really it's I mean, it's intense. It's really dark and it's intense, but it's also just like the whole time you're reading it, you're just like you can like feel her anger and like wanting to like she has so much to say about
Hmm.
romance and like about established tropes within the genre and it's just so fun to read it. I can't wait for
Yeah.
the next one.
Yeah, even like some of the older authors I've been publishing, like even their books are getting more and more progressive. Like I
Hmm.
would say like not like like completely like they weren't progressive already, but like being a little bit more feminist and a little bit more including like stronger female characters in their books. And I'm like, I'm loving it. So I'm loving all the books that we're getting. I think in historical romance sector too, I think in romance in general, like I think the publishing rate is so much higher
Yeah.
than traditional genres. Like I think like almost all romance authors that I know like at least put out one book a year, no matter what genre they're in. Some put out like four, some have
I
like
know. I don't know how
three
they do
releases in a
that.
year. Like you usually don't even in traditional publish like you usually can like expect like a book every year. And it's like if
Hmm.
you don't get a book every year, I'm like, Martha, where's the third book? I'm like, it's been a year. I was like, I need you to write faster. And I did want to see like what can you reveal about the third book?
So
Can you
I
what can you tell us?
So I can tell you, I'm still writing it right now. It's going to be out next year. I'm not sure if it's going to be like book one and two came out like exactly a year apart. I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure if book three will be like in April as well, just because I'm turning it in a little bit later than I turned into Lemon to Love last year. Because it's this one has been a struggle. All the bad things people say about trying to write a second book has been true for me in my third book
Third book.
instead. Because in my defense, trying to write during a pandemic, not great.
Uh-huh.
And it's just been kind of tricky because trying to write about two characters who've already been on page together a lot
Mm.
for two books made it really hard to figure out where like the entry point for the book was. So I literally have 9 first drafts that I tossed out. I think
Oh
I've probably
wow.
tossed out like at least 40,000 words worth of writing that's just like in the trash. It's not going to get used
Wow.
because I just couldn't figure out where to start the book. But I think I
Mhm.
figured it out now. It's due at the end of the month, so hopefully I figured it out. So it's about Emily, who's Violet and Diana's best friend, and Julian Belfry, who's introduced into Heaven to Hoax, who owns a theater. So he's the second son of a Marquis who, in a bid basically to like piss off his daddy, like get a rise out of him, decided to like buy a theater. So like he was like 21 when he did it. It was like kind of a like drunken midnight deal essentially. And then his dad was like, "Oh no, you're not doing this," and he's like, "Yes, I am."
Oh
And
wait, that was the same character who they went to like that theater in
mhm, Cabin to
to
Hoax.
to have it. Okay, now they're connecting the dots.
Yeah.
I remember a theater scene.
Yeah. So he's very scandalous. His dad like disinherited him and is basically like, I will acknowledge you again when you stop running a theater because in like Regency England, like any proximity, like people went to the theater, but like anything like it's being an actor, having anything to do like with the stage was very
Mhm,
scandalous.
mhm.
So basically, Emily and Belfry have known each other for 2 books now, and they've kind of been like dancing around each other. And their book is a marriage of convenience romance.
Ooh.
So basically, Belfry wants his theater to be like seen as more respectable, and so he thinks that by marrying someone very like prim and proper with a very like pristine reputation like Emily's, it'll kind of
Mhm.
signify to society that like he's turned over a new leaf and he's respectable now. And don't you guys want to come to his theater where his like beautiful blonde like innocent wife like goes to shows as well? And then for Emily, like her dad is in debt to this really horrible guy who owns a gaming hell, and the show like she's been like been being courted by this dreadful man for like 2 seasons now because like he's kind of using her the way Belfry wants. So he like wants to like
For money.
get entree to like ton events and stuff. And so he like, I won't call on your dad's debt. Like you have to go around with me. So anyway, so Belfry's like, I'll pay your dad's debts. You can marry me. You get to like have your freedom from your family and from this horrible suitor, and then and I get like a respectable wife that will signify to society that I've turned over a new leaf. And like there'll be no love between us. It's all just a business arrangement, basically. Which always goes
Which
exactly
always goes
according
awry.
to
It's a
plan.
romance.
What
And
could
that when
possibly happen?
they catch feelings, a marriage of convenience becomes a marriage of love.
Yeah, I really love marriage of convenience romances because it's like marriage in trouble, but it's different because
Hmm.
they haven't had a fight. They're just going into this like very cool headed, like, no, this is a business arrangement. We both understand what we're doing here. This is fine. And then it's not.
Oh wow! I like how you first in the first book you have a established married couple, and now that's in With a Marriage in Trouble, and now we're kind of doing like a reverse angle with that with marriage. I never. It's really cool. I like how you kind of like flipped it and like did like the reverse. It's like we still have another married couple, but they're a newly married couple because of marriage of convenience.
Yeah, I have an idea. I can't really talk about any of my future ideas because I don't know if I'm going to write any more books in this series. I do have
Uh,
future ideas, and there's another one that involves possibly like a marriage of convenience, arranged marriage type thing. Because I think it just gives you so much more freedom in a
mhm,
historical if they're married. And I think there are so many interesting ways to like play with like marriage and the different tropes like surrounding marriage in romance. And I
mhm,
feel like there's a lot of like ground there to cover. So we'll see. But it does make your job as a writer easier. And that's what writing To Love
mhm.
and to Loathe. Diana and Jeremy aren't married, but she's a widow, so she can also get away with
She can do whatever she wants.
doing whatever she wants, basically. So it's basically just me being lazy and not wanting to figure out how to write a book for Emily where she's not married and has to be very well behaved the whole time. Also, the entire book is a little bit about her maybe not wanting to be quite as well behaved anymore. So
I was about to say, I was like, marriage also gives you the allowance to like get straight to the steam. You
yes,
don't have to go
that
like, if we sleep together, then we have to get married. I'm like, you're already married now, so like, why not go
yeah,
for it?
and it's funny because I have never written a virgin heroine before. Emily will be the first one because Diana's a
Oh
widow and
yeah,
Violet's already married.
they're
And I've
very
never been
married.
super. I not that I like was like opposed to it, but I've never been super interested in it just because
Mhm,
I feel like that ground has been very well covered by other authors. Like there are so like
mhm.
the vast majority of heroines in historical romance are
Are
virgins, and so I
virgins.
feel like we've seen a lot of scenes where they're a little nervous, but then the hero is just like so skilled that it's their first time. The woman's never had sex before, but it's just amazing right off the. I just feel like you've seen
Yeah.
some variation of that scene a lot of times in historical. So I had fun in my first two books writing heroines who were not virgins. I could kind of dispense with
Mhm,
the whole like, what is sex? What is happening? Piece of things. But it's
yeah.
also I'm kind of excited to write it with Emily. I had a lot of fun writing the first the scene where they have sex for the first time because I was like, well, I have a lot of things I want to say about how this is normally written and like how this is normally handled. So I'm just gonna get it all off my chest now.
The way you're describing this book, like I need the arc like now. I need to see like I need to read this because like now I'm super curious to see how you
I
do
mean,
this one. I was like now
I
I'm
would
super hyped
also
now.
I would also like an arc because that would mean that the book was written. Like every time someone's like, "Oh wow, I can't wait to read it," I'm like, "Guess what? Me too. I'm gonna be really excited to read it."
But when you do get close and it is finished, I was like, I will be like on your Instagram going like, is it,
Yeah,
are you done finishing? Are you done writing the book? Can I read it now? Like you could just send me like
I'll
an
get you an arc.
early
Don't
draft, and
worry.
I just won't say anything. But I was like, I would just go like, ha ha ha. I read the book before anyone else. Arcs have even been available.
I'll make sure you get an arc. Don't worry.
Because I absolutely even the covers. I love your covers for your books. I'm mad
Thank
that they changed
you.
it because I tried to order it and then I was like, wait, I didn't get the new cover for the first book, and I was like, wait, hold on. I was like, I definitely knew they changed the cover for the first book too. I was like, this is the old cover. I love your covers too. I love the trade paperback form. It just like signals to me like this is like not your. You have the. I saw it. I was like, Amazon sent me the middle cover, and I was like, I don't want the middle cover.
So yeah, so people have been asked ever since they announced the second printing with the new, because originally this was just on the ebook, and I wasn't sure they were going to do another printing. But then I think there's been an increase in interest post Bridgerton, so they were like, sure, we'll do another printing, and I was like, cool, thanks Netflix, thanks Shonda Rhimes, I appreciate it. So people have been like messaging me, being like, where can I get the new cover? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't want to promise anyone anything because I don't want someone to buy the book, especially like people who already have this one who are like, oh, I'm going to get the new cover as well. And I'm like, well, okay, I don't want you to like buy the book on my advice and then end up with 2 copies of this one. Someone told, so my local indie has been selling it like gangbusters, unsurprisingly, because I've been in there like signing stuff. So, and I'm local, so they just sell a lot of copies of it. And they told me that the last shipment they ordered, like they got all this one, and someone else told me that
Oh.
they ordered directly from Simon and Schuster. Like they went on the Simon and Schuster website and ordered from them, and they got this copy. So
Oh.
so I don't know what
Oh.
to say.
Okay.
I've been seeing, like, I was in Barnes and Noble today and I saw they had this one out still, but that might have been
Mhm.
old copies that they still had. I've been tagged by other bookstores that have this one. But I like don't like the majority of the new printing went to Canada, like 75%. I don't know. I think they sell kind of well in Canada or something. Um, who knows? I love you,
That's
Canada.
that's random.
But yeah, like the majority of the new ones went to Canada, but they still have a sizable number of them in the U.S. as well. I just can't figure out
I
where
can't
they
figure out where to
are.
get them. I
Exactly.
saw
Yeah, like I
Amazon,
do
they
not
changed the
recommend.
cover.
Yeah, I'm like, okay. Like I would not buy them from like buying from Amazon or Bookshop. I wouldn't do. I don't think you feel comfortable that you would get the new cover that way. If anyone, like, the best, probably the easiest thing would be for someone, if they're really like hell bent on this, would be to like call their local indie and be like, do you have the
Get
new
this book for
cover?
me.
Though it's funny, I went in to sign one the other day and it was like all this one, and then it was one of the old one they still had left, and they were like, this person specifically requested that you sign the original one for them. And I was like, that's cool, I don't care. Whatever.
I'm like a stickler because I want my books to match. And then I
I
saw the
know.
cover change. I was like, this is not gonna match.
I know.
I like
That's why I
it's
was very
gonna
excited
bother
they
me.
printed the new one, because I was like, it was gonna bother me a little bit forever. I understand why they changed it. They wanted it to more clearly like really look rom-commy. Like they wanted people who were looking at like just a bunch of like books on a display or something, who like, you know, Sally Thorne and Christina Lauren and Jasmine Guillory and all those types of people. They wanted them to look at the cover and think, yep, this is for me.
This
And
is
I do
something,
think
yeah.
it's working. Like I've gotten tagged in a lot of things where I've seen people being like, I just picked it up because the cover was so cute or whatever. So I think I really love the cover for the original one. Like I love the cameos and everything. I think it's
Yeah.
really pretty. But I do think that the new covers maybe scream rom-com a little more than the original cover
hmm
did. So that was the thinking. And I was just very excited they did a second printing, because I was like, I just want them to match on my shelf.
And like I like the bright bold colors. Like it gives me like contemporary slash historical feels to it.
Yep.
Like I think Sophie Jordan has like a YA with like a similar type of cover. I can't
Oh,
remember
the
what the
new one,
title of the
her new
book
one that's
is.
coming out,
Yeah, it's like
16 Scandals.
yes.
I
And it's
know.
like
Every time
it
I see that
reminds me
one
of that
somewhere, I'm like,
cover.
that cover's really cute. Whenever I'm like scrolling through and I see it, I'm like, that's adorable.
I was like, because let's be real, I'm a huge cover person.
Yeah.
Honestly, like I will like I just see a cover, I'm like, oh, okay, what's the trope? Okay, one click. Don't
Like
even read the synopsis.
the whole like don't judge a book by its cover thing, I'm like, well, that kind of discounts how much thought and work goes into book covers. There's like a lot of
hmm
like pieces that happen. Like I'm trying to, so what's happened to Hoax, the cover was original, it was this, then it was originally red, and then it got changed because there was a concern that it looked too much like The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory if it was red. So we changed it to like this
hmm
pinkish purple color instead. And when they first sent me the proof of it, instead of it just being like the heads and the cameos, it was like full body, and it looked almost like too caricature-ish. So we asked them to change it to only be the heads, because we thought it looked more like romantic that way.
Ah.
So, and then let's see, with To Love and to Loathe, they kind of explained when they sent me like the proofs for the cover, like they kind of explained they're thinking you want it to really signify rom-com, blah blah, and I was like, that's fine, I understand. At the time, I was like, my books aren't gonna match, but I like want people to buy it, so I get it.
Mhm.
But then originally, Diana and Jeremy's hair was darker, because Jeremy's supposed to be like blonde, like golden, and then
Ah.
Diana's supposed to be. Diana's is always described as like honey colored, so kind of like dark blonde, brownish. So their hair is originally darker, and I was like, but their hair is the wrong color. So can you lighten that? But they couldn't lighten it as much as I wanted them to because
It
it
will make
would
the
clash with the frame. Like Jeremy's
yeah.
hair really should be the same color as the frame, but then his like head would blend into the frame. And I wanted the frame on there. I love the frame because it has
Mhm.
a plot significance. So they lightened it as much as they could, basically. And it's funny, my editor's already been talking to people about the cover for book 3, To Marry and to Meddle, and so this time
Mhm.
she was like, just to confirm, Emily is blonde and Belfry has dark hair, right? And I was like, yes, thank
Yes.
you.
Oh, and that's the title of the third book, To Marry and to Meddle.
To Marry and to Meddle.
I
It
love
is
your
the
titles
I did
so
not
much.
I have not To Marry and to Meddle. I came up with it, and my editor came up with it. We both came up with the exact same title individually of each other, and then she like emailed me like 2 days later. And she's like, so "I'm thinking To Marry and to Meddle," and I was like, "That's what I came up with. This is amazing!" Because I did not come up with the title for either of the first 2 books. To Have and to Hoax was I
Uh-huh.
got an agent for it, and we sold it as To Hoax a Husband, and my editor wanted to change it because so many rom-coms have like punny titles that she wanted us to
Mhm.
have some kind of pun or something. So she came up with The Have and to Hoax, which there were a bunch of options, but that one I like laughed out loud the first time I read it, and I was like, we have to do that one. And people at Simon and Schuster agreed. And then with To Love and to Loathe, I wrote it as The Wedding Wager, and then when I sent it to my agent, she was like, I think we should try to match the title to the first one. Do you have any ideas? And I was like,
Mhm.
no. And then I was like, friends, do you have any ideas? And my friend was like, what about To Love and to Loathe? And I was like, bing, bing, bing. So I've not come up with either title. So I was very excited
Really?
when I jointly came up with the title for book 3. It made me feel very accomplished. I guarantee this is the only time this will ever happen. I'm really bad at titling things. So
Because like I can like out of all the books that I read, and I read a lot, like I can always remember the titles of your books. I'm like, oh, it's to have. If I can get to have, then I can get the other part, or to have and hoax and to little and to love. I was like, is she trying to put together like a poetic sentence or something that like is gonna be stringed together like Alexander Bracken did for her Darkest Minds, where like the titles like make one complete sentence.
no, although I'm a little worried if there end up being more than 3 books, I'm like, what are we gonna call a 4th book?
Whatever.
Like I'm getting a little stressed, but someone will figure something out, I hope. No, I'm really bad at titles. I also really they're just similar enough that literally every time I post about one of them on social media, as soon as I post, I'm like, did I mention the right book? I like every time I've done any kind of promo for To Love and to Loathe, I've been like, did I call it To Have and to Hoax? I don't know. I don't think I've messed up yet, but I really like live in fear. I think actually book 3 will be better because To Marry and to Meddle, since they're more syllables, it doesn't
Hmm.
like roll off the tongue. Like To Have and to Hoax, Love and to Loathe, like they're very like it's the
They
same
can mix them
beats.
up.
But yeah, but To Marry and to Meddle is a little bit more of a mouthful. So I'm like, okay, I don't
You
think I'll
got
be as
this one.
nervous that I'm gonna say the wrong book this time. So that's an improvement.
And then you also, I heard you have a recent book deal for like, is it 2 more books in this world,
Mm.
or is it
So it's
separate?
no. So the book deal was for To Marry and to Meddle, and so it's just a 1 book deal. I will say I have ideas for the future. So we'll see. Once I finish writing and then editing To Marry and to Meddle this summer sometime probably. Um,
Mhm.
I'm gonna sit down and do some thinking. I've got an idea and possibly one more idea after that, but it's publishing. It's unpredictable. When you're
Mhm.
doing it with 1 book deals, like you just never know. But I have like promised people basically that like West and Sophie, who were minor characters in To Have and to
Mhm.
Hoax, and they weren't as on page as much in To Love and to Loathe, but they were
Mhm.
there. I've promised people if I don't write a book for them, I will at least write like a short story or like a novella or something.
Mhm.
So like don't live in fear that they're just going to never have a happily ever after. I'm going to do something with it. I don't know if it'll be a full book or not.
Okay. That is so cool. And we will hold you to that. We will expect something for that couple. Or I will message all the fans and be like, okay, we'll have to spam her DM to get the story out of her before. And
Yeah,
if you can announce like, oh, I'm gonna do a paranormal series next, we'll be like, no, 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 no. You have one more. You have another couple you need to address before you
yeah.
go on to the other series.
I have an idea for them. It's not very like well thought out. So I actually have another idea that I might try to write first, so I can give this one a little more time to cook. Because I want to get it right. But also, I'm like, is there a full length book here? Is it maybe more of a novella? I don't know. It's really. I think it's at this point I like built it up in my mind so much that I'm like I don't want to like mess it up. So I don't want to write it until I feel ready to write it. So we'll see when that may be.
We'll see. And on like another note, this should be an easier question. What are some of your favorite romance? You can either go books or authors if you can't pick your favorite books.
Okay, I'm gonna do authors for sure because
Okay.
that's easier. So I'm gonna make. I've been like started cheating whenever I get asked this question. I just give like 10 answers, and then I like break it down like what my favorite contemporary authors are and my favorite historical authors are because I'm just cheating. So I really love Lucy Parker, who writes
Mm-hmm.
contemporary set in like the London theater world. She has like
Mm-hmm.
my favorite banter of like any romance author ever, I think. I really love Talia Hibbert's books. Also, I just read Actor Age Eve Brown. She also I'm a sucker for good banter and good dialogue, and both of those authors
Mm-hmm.
just it is spot on. It's
Mm-hmm.
so good. And then I love Sally Thorne a lot also. I think as I mentioned, The Hated Game is
Mm-hmm.
a gateway contemporary for me. On the historical front, I really love Julia Quinn. I really love Tessa Dare and Sarah McLean, Loretta Chase. And then I also really love Alyssa Cole's Civil War
Ooh.
series, which
Mm-hmm.
I was a little like, oh, Civil War. Like, do I want to read a romance novel set during a Civil War? But that series is
It's amazing.
astonishing. It really is. And An Extraordinary Union is one of my favorite romance novels ever.
Mm-hmm.
The chemistry between the hero and heroine, that one is insane. And
It's
I just think
amazing.
writing an interracial romance set during the Civil War is like such a high degree of difficulty that if you like manage to execute it even like remotely competently, I would be impressed. So to have it be
Mm-hmm.
as good as that whole series is astonishing to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that was like 10 authors. So
That's fine. Like you can. That's why I gave like an easy out. Like you could say authors instead of favorite books. Books are harder. It's easy to
oh
say like
yeah.
an author that you love. Like
And
I think
especially
I love
with
Talia Hibbert.
with romance, like I don't remember individual books as well because I read so many of
Mm,
them. Like I mean, some really
mhm,
stick out to me. Like An Extraordinary Union really sticks out. Like The Kiss Quotient really sticks out for me. Like I really remember that specific book very well. Like things like that.
mhm,
Like I remember all 8 Bridgerton books really well because I read the whole series like 3 times. Like much better than I remember your average historical romance book actually, because those all really start to blend together for me. But if you read a
mhm.
whole series 3 times, you're gonna remember them. But for
Okay.
the most part, it's like I just remember like what the specific things about a writer's like an author's writing that I like. Like I know that I love Talia Hibbert and Lucy Parker's dialogue. Like I know I love like how funny Tessa
Mhm,
Dare is, like things like that. And so that's why I
mhm.
tend to like recommend authors more than like specific books a lot
More
of the
than
time.
books. Yeah, that makes complete sense because authors tend to have more romance. They tend to have a certain brand of
Mm-hmm.
like what they're known for, and then like
Mm-hmm.
that's why they have like so many like pen names, especially in the
Yeah.
indie community where like you never know who the actual author is,
Yeah.
but like they're popular because like I was like, but who actually are you? Like no one knows what pen name this is.
Yeah, and it's like so yeah, and I think it's really like helpful to readers because then like you have like a really firm expectation set for like what kind of thing a certain author delivers. It's interesting because I want to
Mhm,
write things that are non-Regency romance, but I publish under my real name and I don't want to really stop publishing under my real name.
mhm,
And I do worry about that a little bit, but I will say like I think anything I write would be funny. Like I think if I changed like to writing in a different time period or like doing like a different subgenre or something, I think that like the tone would be similar, so I'm hopeful that that would be enough to convince the powers that be in the publishing world that I can keep writing under my same name, mainly because
mhm.
I'm lazy. and don't want to have to write under
How
two
does ever
different
pen it?
names because it seems confusing. Like, more power to everyone who does it. This seems hard.
Yeah, it depends on if you keep it secret. And if it's
Yeah.
not a secret, then everyone's like, we know who you are. Like we know, like I know that's you who wrote that
Yeah.
paranormal, or just like just don't shock us and like write a literary fiction novel that isn't a romance. And we're like, oh,
Right.
Martha Waters came out with a new book, and we're like, this is not a romance. But
I would
this is
literally never do that.
depressing. I was like, what?
I would never. I would rather
What?
die.
I was like, what is this? I was like, hold on. Let me DM Martha. I'm like, this is not, like, what is this book? Like,
Nothing
did I
I would
miss the
ever write.
romance? And then my final question for you is like, what are some of the three, you can do like three or more favorite TV shows slash movies that you've been enjoying? It could they be all time or been enjoying this year, if you have watched anything.
Let's see. It's funny. I don't watch that much stuff anymore just because I've gotten into this weird thing where between working full time and writing, I don't have that much downtime. And when I do, I really want
Mm-hmm.
to read. Like, I find that to be a much
Mm-hmm.
more like satisfying like leisure activity. Though I was like the last person in the world to watch Schitt's Creek this year, and that was like a really good pandemic discovery because I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, this is really warm and fuzzy. This was like exactly the time I needed to discover this show. So that has been a real
Yeah.
source of joy for me
Mm-hmm.
this year. Um, on a more like all-time scale, like my favorite movies are probably Clueless
Ooh.
and The Princess Bride
Ooh.
and The
Okay.
Philadelphia Story, which is like an old school rom com from like the
Mm-hmm.
40s, which I don't know. I feel like my books sort of have a little bit of like kind of screwball comedy energy to them.
Mm-hmm.
So that Philadelphia Story influence is there. But yeah, basically funny movies about people falling in love that are like just like a little bit clever about it is kind of like what I gravitate towards.
Okay. I like that you mentioned Schitt's Creek. Like I love Schitt's Creek. If you want something similar, there's Kim's Convenience,
I keep
which
hearing
is
good
like
things
it's
about
basic.
that.
Hmm. It's like I think the guy who plays a brother is like is coming up in some Marvel movie or something. That's how I figured out about the show. And like I think it's ending. I think it's ending soon. The next season is going to be the last, but they're all on Netflix, and it's all set in Canada at a Korean convenience store. And it's really funny. I really like it. It's like it's probably I binge them at the same time, and they're like nice like compliments back to each other.
I
So
mean,
like, if you want more of that, Kim's Convenience is definitely one you want to check out.
I just want nice Canadians to make television for me that makes me feel good. So this sounds great.
It's amazing. You will love it. Like I heard people talking about it for a long time, but I was like Netflix. I'm like bad with Netflix shows. I tend to like start them but never finish them.
Yeah.
It's like Bridgerton. I started it and then for some reason I just like stopped watching, and then I read the book. And then I came back and I was like, let me watch another episode. Then I watched something else on Netflix. I'm like, I really just need to finish Bridgerton. It
I
took me
watched the
like 2 months
entire
to finish
thing
it.
on Christmas Day. Like I woke up at 5 a.m. and just because I'm a weirdo who wakes up really early, and I was like, I could go back to bed, or I could watch like 3 episodes of Bridgerton before I have to go hang out with my family. So at like 8:30, my mom and sister live in the same town as me, and my mom calls her, so you coming over? And I was like, yes. She was like, are you watching Bridgerton already? And I was like, I may have watched 3 episodes already. And she was like, it's 8:30 in the morning. And I was like, whatever, leave me alone, mom. So it's fine. Then I came home after Christmas dinner and I was like, 5 more episodes to go. It is time. And so I watched them all. I was like, the only good thing about the pandemic is that my Christmas was like a lot more scaled back than it would normally be. So
Hmm.
I had plenty of time to watch 8 hours of television in a single day.
But it's such. I was like mad that I stopped when I did. I was like, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna go read the book, and then I'll come back and finish the rest. And I was like, I like the TV show. I'm like, it's unpopular. I like the TV show more than the books.
It's
And a lot of
interesting.
people would disagree with me.
No, I love those books. They were like my gateway to romance, and she like the way she writes. Like I think she's really funny, and like I just like they're exactly the kind of historical romance that I like. But like there are things that I think the show does better, and just by virtue of the fact that it's it was written in 2020 and not in 2000. Like that makes a big
And Shonda
difference.
Rhimes is behind it. Like
Yeah.
she
And yeah,
like
and the whole like color conscious casting like just makes it
hmm
feel like just it just feels fun to me. Like it feels
hmm
fresh and it feels modern. It doesn't feel like a stodgy period piece. And I
yeah.
mean I know I've seen a lot of like very smart like people kind of pushing back and being like, is this actually that progressive? It doesn't really engage with like the racism of the time. And I'm like, okay, that's fair. Because yeah, where
But it
this
doesn't have to. Like
like
he's a
I mean,
dude. He's
listen,
rich.
I think you have a point, and at the same time, I
hmm
don't care because it's fun and it's nice to see like a period piece where it's not just all white
hmm
people. And like, why does it matter? Because the whole thing is wildly unrealistic anyway. Like, who cares if there weren't actually black dukes? Like, there weren't like a bajillion hot dukes either. Like, this is fun to watch.
Yeah, like it's escapism with like
Yeah,
even the queen. I love the queen. Like just the like her introduction in the series and like have that being a person of color too. And then
it's so
I I
interesting.
I I was like disappointed when someone I shipped Marina and Colin and someone told me like they're like, oh no, it's Penelope and Colin. I was like, what? I was like, how dare you, Julia? And then I found out
I
like Marina dies in one like the
Yeah,
later books. I was like,
I
hold on,
want to
hold on,
know
hold on,
what
hold on,
their
hold on.
plan is there because yeah, and she's not really in the books at all. Like she's like just mentioned as having died at the beginning of the fifth book, and I'm like, well, okay, but now you've like introduced her as a character, and I'm gonna be really mad if you just kill her off after this. So I'm like very
hmm
curious what their like plan for her is. I hope she like somehow manages to like get some sort of like happy ending for herself that does not involve her like trying to kill herself like she doesn't. Also the whole thing, her whole storyline in the books is like wildly problematic from like a mental health rep standpoint as well.
hmm
Another example of like a thing that did not age well at all about the original books,
hmm
and that I really hope they completely change if they're
Should.
gonna even
hmm
try to do it like remotely similarly for the show, because I'm just like, what's the plan here, team? What are we doing?
Yeah, I was like when I found out about her character, I was like, wait, but I like her. I like her more than the Bridgertons. Like she's such a. I loved her, especially with her and Daphne becoming friends in the end. I was like, I just the commentary. I was like, I'm like. Then when someone told me what happens in the books, I was like, wait, what? I felt like writing Julia Quinn an email like going like, I need you to go back and change Colin
Can you
and
fix
Penelope
this?
to Colin and Marina. And like
No, that's
Penelope,
like
since Penelope is like Lady Whistle down, I need her to like not get her choose someone else for her.
this is like sacrilege. People freaking love Colin and Penelope. They're gonna be like coming after you. People are
I'm fine
obsessed
with
with this.
that.
I'm a dark horse, and that my favorite Bridgerton book is Francesca's, and Francesca like was barely even on the show. Like she went to Bath for
hmm
piano lessons, and like
Yeah.
was gone most of the season. And it's kind of how she is in the books too. She's definitely the one who's kind of like the most separate from the rest of her family. But like her book is my favorite, so I'm like, okay, I just need you guys to get to season 6 so you can do Francesca. But I don't know if they'll make it
Honestly,
far.
I probably think they will, judging by how success. I'm not surprised if Netflix isn't greenlit like the whole like 8 seasons it would take to do the whole show because like
I
they could
know.
easily do it.
I wonder if they're gonna start combining characters. Like, it's not like the second season's just gonna be like Anthony, like the Viscount who loved
hmm
me. But I'm wondering if past that point they're gonna start like combining some of the books into, because like 8 seasons
mm
is a lot, and also in the books like Colin and Penelope, their book, and Eloise's book, and Francesca's book all basically take place like at the same time, kind of. So I'm like, you could combine them and have one big like mega season of TV or something. And then I don't know how the heck they're gonna do like seasons. The showrunner says he wants to do all the siblings, and I'm like, but the actor and actress who play Gregory and Hyacinth are like 13. You're gonna need a long time for them to be old enough to have their own season.
Just watch them like just quietly recast them of older actors
I
and say
know.
we did a time jump.
I know. My friend was like, "They're just gonna recast them," and I was like, "No, I think it would be really weird if they recast them like 6 seasons in. It's going to be extremely strange to viewers. Like if they're just suddenly like a new actor and actress playing these two people. Like I don't know that that would work."
hmm Yeah, I can't wait for season two. I saw the cast that they chose for the person playing Kate. I was like, I
Oh,
know
she's
her
so
from Sex
beautiful.
Education. and her role on that show, I was like, oh my goodness, like she's gonna be amazing.
I'm
Like
really excited.
Netflix, adapt Martha Waters books. You have
Yes,
the money.
Shonda, Shonda, are
No.
you listening?
I was like, you need more content to fill that deal of yours. You need more shows. I would love if that happened, but thank you so much, Martha, for coming on my channel. It's been amazing opportunity to talk to you. I had so much fun talking about all historicals and everything about that. And I'll leave links to if you want to buy the books, I'll leave links to the Amazon link so you can go buy them, or I'll probably link to the Simon Schuster site so you can get the correct covers if you want the new edition of To Have and Hoax.
No.
Hopefully,
I
and then I'll
think
also
I
leave
think yes.
and then I'll also leave Martha Waters like all her social media links. So if you want to stalk her like I do, you can like do that as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll catch you guys with a brand new video. Bye everyone.